Imagine, just for a second, living in a world of perpetual war, relentless militaristic propaganda, and absolute, inescapable government surveillance. A society so heavily monitored that even a stray thought, a tiny, fleeting idea, is a crime punishable by death. Welcome to George Orwell's terrifyingly bleak masterpiece, 1984. Today we're diving into this explainer to unpack the chilling narrative from beginning to end, exploring the powerful vocabulary Orwell uses to build this incredibly oppressive atmosphere. So let's step straight into the dark, cinematic world of Oceania.
Right from the jump, we get this iconic opening line. It was a bright, cold day in April, and the clocks were striking 13. Now that immediately signals to us that something is fundamentally deeply wrong here. We follow our protagonist, a guy named Winston Smith, as he makes his way back to his dilapidated apartment in a place ironically called Victory Mansions. He keeps his head down, chin nuzzled into his chest, just trying to escape the bitter wind. He's really just a minor cog in the great, terrifying machine of the party, desperately trying to survive another day.
The state of his world is, well, it's a completely sordid existence. And by sordid, I mean foul, run down, and just totally repulsive. Winston's London isn't some gleaming metropolis. It's a decaying, ruined city where citizens are living in extreme poverty under the crushing weight of the party. It's a sordid, daily grind, characterized by the smell of boiled cabbage, worn-out clothing, and an atmosphere of inescapable dinginess.
And everywhere you look, there's this unblinking warning. Big Brother is watching you. But here's the thing. It isn't just a catchy poster. It's a terrifying, literal reality. Inside Winston's apartment, and honestly everywhere else he goes, telescreens are monitoring every single sound above a whisper. They're watching every movement. Privacy literally does not exist. As you can imagine, this constant, unyielding surveillance instills a deep, quiet paranoia in every single person.
What's really wild is that this surveillance isn't accidental at all. It's highly contrived. Every detail shows the effects of intense planning and manipulation. Even those massive posters of Big Brother are artificially contrived so his dark eyes seem to physically follow you wherever you move. It's a carefully engineered atmosphere of inescapable psychological pressure, deliberately designed to remind everyone, at all times, of the party's absolute power.
And how does the party maintain that absolute power? Well, they do it by warping reality itself, starting with three mind-bending, paradoxical slogans. War is peace, freedom is slavery, and ignorance is strength. By forcing the population to just accept these massive contradictions as plain facts, the party demands unquestioning loyalty. They are systematically destroying the very concept of independent thought.
Which brings us to Winston's first genuinely dangerous act. He manages to find a tiny hidden blind spot in his apartment just barely out of view of the telescreen, and he engages in a completely furtive act of rebellion. It's marked by extreme quiet, caution, and secrecy. Sitting there in total hiding, he actually begins to write his forbidden thoughts in a diary. Now, in Oceania, this is known as thought crime, and the penalty for it is certain death.
You see, Winston's mind is a very dangerous place because he actually remembers the past. He clearly recalls three purged party leaders, Jones, Aronson, and Rutherford. Back in 1973, Winston actually held a photograph in his own hands proving their innocence, proving definitively that the party had lied. But by 1984, the party has entirely erased that history. Winston is out there desperately trying to hold on to any shred of objective reality.
And ironically, this erasure of history is literally Winston's day job at the Ministry of Truth. History in Oceania is a palimpsest. Think of a palimpsest like an old manuscript that gets scraped clean so new text can be written right over the top of the old stuff. Winston's daily duty is to constantly alter old newspapers and records, destroying any inconvenient facts and replacing them with whatever the party's current narrative is. The past is completely up for grabs.
Let me give you a great example of how this manipulation works in everyday life. The objective reality might be that the chocolate ration was just reduced from 30 down to 20 grams, but the party, they hit the airwaves and announce it as a successful increase to 20 grams. Citizens have to use this concept called doublethink. Basically, they must accept the new lie as the absolute truth, while simultaneously and completely forgetting they ever knew the original fact. Crazy, right? To survive under this philosophy, which they call ingsoc, individuals have to constantly repudiate reality. They must fiercely refuse to acknowledge what is actually valid or true. Winston and his fellow citizens are forced to constantly reject their own basic memories, their own logic, and their common sense. They have to claim a totally fabricated world as their own just to avoid drawing the terrifying gaze of the thought police. Yet, despite all this crushing control, Winston develops a palpable sense of hope. It's this heavy, physical feeling in his chest, so strong it's almost tangible, like you could reach out and touch it, that this system simply cannot last forever. He looks out at the disregarded masses of the working class, known as the proles, and feels a palpable certainty that they are the ones holding the key to freedom. He actually writes this in his diary. If there was hope, it must lie with the proles. This is his desperate, burning logic. The proles make up 85% of Oceania's entire population. Winston believes that if these swarming, completely ignored masses could just wake up, if they could just become conscious of their sheer numbers and strength, they could easily rise up and shake off this totalitarian system like a horse shaking off a fly. But Winston's hope also dangerously attaches to a very powerful inner party member named O'Brien. The thing about O'Brien is that his facial expressions are so tightly controlled, so completely inscrutable that it's impossible to understand what he's really thinking. Because O'Brien is essentially a blank slate, Winston falsely projects his own desires onto him, convincing himself that this imposing guy must secretly belong to a legendary underground resistance called the Brotherhood. This false belief gets totally cemented by a mysterious dream Winston has, where O'Brien's voice speaks to him in the dark, saying, "We shall meet in the place where there is no darkness." Bolstered by this really fatalistic sense of destiny, Winston decides to take an even more massive risk. He begins a forbidden, deeply secretive romance with a young woman named Julia. They even go so far as to rent a hidden room above an old junk shop, desperately trying to carve out a tiny, private world just for themselves. But look, there's absolutely no escaping Big Brother. The narrative shifts violently here, dropping Winston from these fleeting, beautiful moments of love straight into a terrifying nightmare. They are inevitably captured. Winston is dragged deep into the bowels of the Ministry of Love. And here, the physical reality of the state isn't enforced by catchy slogans anymore. It's enforced by the brutal smash of police truncheons, those short, stout clubs used to literally beat prisoners into total submission. And then comes the truly dreadful twist. O'Brien enters Winston's cell, but he's not there as a savior from the Brotherhood. No, he's there as Winston's chief torturer. He makes it crystal clear to Winston that any attempt to prevaricate, any attempt to be deliberately ambiguous or to mislead them, will just result in immediate, agonizing pain. O'Brien already knows Winston's every single thought. As the psychological and physical torture really ramps up, O'Brien delivers what has to be one of the most chilling visions of the future ever written. If you want a picture of the future, imagine a boot stamping on a human face, forever. He explains to Winston that the party isn't trying to create some perfect utopia. Not at all. They seek power purely for the sake of power. They are building a society fueled entirely by hatred, fear, and endless, unbroken suffering. The party doesn't just want miserable obedience from its citizens. They demand abject submission. We're talking utter, complete humiliation. O'Brien casually tells Winston that before they finally execute him, they're going to tear his mind to pieces. When Winston does finally surrender, it has to be of his own free will. They will accept absolutely nothing less than the total, ground-up destruction of his individuality.
O'Brien forces Winston to accept the party's twisted philosophy, which is this terrifying form of collective solipsism. Now, solipsism is normally the philosophical theory that only the self exists, but O'Brien twists it, arguing that external objective reality simply does not exist. Reality exists solely within the collective, tightly controlled mind of the party. If the party says 2 + 2 = 5, well, then it does. He tells Winston that human beings are infinitely malleable, that we are completely capable of being shaped and bent. Through relentless, absolutely agonizing cycles of electroshock and emotional torment, O'Brien literally hammers Winston's human nature, bending him into the exact shape the state desires. He is systematically erasing Winston's intellect, prepping him for the ultimate breaking point.
And that breaking point happens in Room 101. It's a place designed to contain every individual prisoner's worst, most unendurable fear. For Winston, that's a cage of starving rats, strapped directly to his face. In a moment of pure, blind, animalistic panic, he finally snaps. He screams out, "Do it to Julia, not me!" And with that single, desperate betrayal, Winston completely abandons his love, severing the very last shred of his humanity.
Having successfully broken him down to nothing, The party just releases Winston back out into the cold, sordid streets of London. But he's just a hollow shell now. As the text says, something was killed in your breast, burnt out, cauterized out. Later on, when he accidentally bumps into Julia again, neither of them feels anything but a dull, cold emptiness. Their love, their intense loyalty, the rebellious spirit, it's all been completely, permanently extinguished.
Which brings us to the tragic, incredibly haunting conclusion of the story. Winston is sitting alone in a cafe, gazing up at a massive poster of the dictator, and his absolute psychological defeat is finally complete. He loved Big Brother. As we wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you with a provocative thought to chew on. In an age where digital surveillance, political polarization, and the constant manipulation of truth are becoming more and more common, how far away are we, really, from the dark, highly malleable world George Orwell warned us about? Keep questioning the narrative, guys, and keep seeking the truth.